Live from Chicago's #1 news, ABC7 Eyewitness News at 5 starts right now.
Good evening, everyone. There have been 3 confirmed deaths reported in Illinois.
Let's begin with ABC7's Phil Schwartz and Jerry Taft, both in the Weather Center tonight. Guys, what do you have?
You know what, Ravi, we've been watching this throughout the entire day. The good news, the storms are over, but we are still dealing with some very high winds gusting at times to over 60 miles per hour. We have a high wind warning in effect until 8 o'clock for much of the area. North and west, we do not have a high wind warning. We have a wind advisory, but we continue to see winds gusting at times to over 60 miles per hour. The current wind gust at O'Hare is 43. We have a gust of 51 right now at Midway and a gust of 54 in Gary. Earlier, just within the last hour, we had gusts over 60 miles per hour at Midway. We had a gust earlier in Rochelle to 67 miles per hour. So while the thunderstorms are over, the strong winds continue. Taking a look at high-resolution Doppler, you can see some pretty good rain still falling up in especially Lake County in Illinois. Most of this is light. None of it is severe. The severe thunderstorms have ended, at least for us. Now, I want to show you this picture. This was at about 11 a.m. These are the severe thunderstorms that were moving into the area. But you see this cell here in that developing hook. That was the tornado east of Peoria. Watch as we put this into motion, how this cell lifted to the northeast. There it goes, right across Will County, right up towards Gary, and then out over the lake. That is the storm that produced the tornadoes as it lifted to the northeast. The good news, the severe weather is over. The bad news is we continue to to deal with some very strong winds. Now, with a look at some of the storm reports we've seen so far and kind of the evolution of this event, let me go to my partner, Jerry Taft.
All right, Phil, first of all, I'd like to start with we were on the air last night after the USC-Stanford game, and it was pretty well telegraphed at that point that we were definitely going to see some pretty heavy storms. At that point on the news at 11 p.m., we were in an area of moderate risk for thunderstorms. After we were off the air, after midnight, it changed to a high-risk area, which is certainly unusual for this time of year. And I showed this on the news last night, and I highlighted this area north of Kansas City, north of St. Louis, as the area that it will probably be developing and moving to the north and east. And if you take a look at the radar, you can see generally in northern Missouri and then across through St. Louis, this is where the heavy storms eventually developed and then roared through the Peoria and the Chicago area. And of course, we did have plenty of damage associated with these storms. Most of these storms started over here in right around Washington. Tornadoes reported just before, actually before about 10 o'clock in the morning, and that was at 11 o'clock, and they continue to move to the north and east. By the time they got into our local area, what happened? I'm still there? Well, I'm not here on the camera, so I can't really point at what we're doing here. So back to you guys. There's nothing I can really do.
Let's go to Mike Kaplan, though, in the Weather Center. Mike?
Alan, one of the things we've been observing is how unusual is it to get a tornado in November in the Chicago area, and the National Weather Service keeps track of these things. And since 1951, so a little more than 60 years, there have been a grand total of 12 tornadoes. So you do a little math, that's about 1 every 5 years. And if you look a little more closely at this list, you'll see that half of those dozen occurred on the same day, back on November 12th of 1965. Here are the counties that were impacted. Back in 1951 on November 13th, Lake County, Indiana, Ford County, well south of Chicago, back on November 26th that same year. Then on November 12th and 65, DuPage, Cook, LaSalle, Grundy, Will, and Lake County, Indiana all had separate tornado touchdowns. Back in 1971, far southwest areas, Livingston County got hit. Lake, Illinois, back in 1975. Will County in 1984. Then you have to go all the way to 2010. From 1984, we didn't have another November tornado until 3 years ago. You may remember that one went through Caledonia in Winnebago and then far northwestern McHenry County. Minimal damage there, and they are in late spring and summer, which is what we typically consider tornado season here in Chicago. So that's one of the reasons why some of these tornadoes, while infrequent in November, can be quite strong. Ravi?